experience in the IT industry in different roles. He spent close to a decade in TCS and moved on to the Trident Software Limited for close to 2 decades as Vice President Operations. He has also been a chief mentor to a startup in business strategy, addressing sales, marketing, technology, and development. He is currently offering his services as the global head of delivery for Valgenesis, a product company serving mainly life sciences industry. So he is speaking today on the topic under the hood of software industry, some aspects. On behalf of management and staff, we welcome Mr. Nagaraj. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your kind introduction. Shall I commence?
Yes, sir.
Let me share my screen first. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and present some of the learnings that I have gone through to this audience. Thanks, Arvind, and thank you, Professor, for arranging this. Now, what I have tried to do is that I have tried to give you all a peek into the software industry. Some aspects, obviously we can't discuss all the aspects, but some of the aspects that was bothering me when I was, in the younger days in the software industry, some of these bothered me. Should I do this or should I do that? Where should I go? Is this the right one or is that the right one? So these are the choices that we all have. In any industry, this way we will have such choices. Even in education department, you'll have choices. So like that, we also have some choices in the software industry. So there some aspects I have picked up and then I have tried to present. So it can be an interactive session. If you have any doubts and things like that, please do not hesitate to send a message. Maybe Arvind can help moderate that a little bit because I'll be looking at the screen here. So I can give a pause at the end of each of these small topics, and then we can discuss that particular topic as well. So there are 4 topics.
Anil, Arvind here, sorry to interrupt. Generally, the protocol is at the end of the session, there will be Q&A session chat box, which the moderator will try to present to you at the end of it. So you present uninterrupted for the 45 minutes or whatever.
Oh, okay, fine. Thank you. Thanks, Arvind. So, I've in each of these 4 topics, there are a few slides under each of those, and then there is one takeaway slide at the end of each of that 4 topics. So that's how it's organized. So let me start with my introduction first. So is the slide clear now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. So I have spent more than 30 years in the software services industry, starting with Tata Consultancy Services for more than 10 years, and then moved on to 2 other companies. Now I am in a product company. When I was in services industry, I had the opportunity to start as a programmer and moved into different roles. So I moved into project management role, customer account management role. Then there were some opportunities that allowed me to get into marketing. So there was a time period when I was building a marketing team, working hands-on on the marketing side, and we built a marketing engine for the company. At some other time, I was a salesman with a bag in my hand, walking on the street, trying to figure out who is my next customer. So that was a time period. But by and large, my focus was on the delivery and engineering side. I also worked on quality side as head of quality. That gave me an opportunity to build processes, understand what a process is and how a process will help execute a project and so on. I was head of HR for some time, which allowed me to look into people practices, procedures, and so on. So because, I could dabble my hand into all these areas, so I have brought some thoughts together. So I wish to share my knowledge and ideas to all the bright minds assembled here. Thanks for that. So let me move on. Services company or product company. It took some time for me to understand what a services company or what a product company is. So these are the knowledge is on a hindsight, So that is what I'm saying, that when we get into an industry, it becomes difficult for us to see the industry from a distance. You're all just finishing up or doing the college courses. You will come out, and once you come out, you will face the industry, whichever industry. But what is relevant here will also be relevant in other industries. So you have to look at it that way. So in software, we have this, two divisions: services company or a product company, right? So let me dive deep into that a little bit. I'm giving you a structure of a services company, how a services company looks like from inside. What are the departments that make up the services industry? I'm not getting into finance and HR and other support divisions. These are some of the core divisions. On the left side, if you see, there are projects, which is the core of any software industry. The projects are the core. The projects itself are under certain verticals. Large companies have region verticals. They have India office, they have US office, they have Europe office, they have Australia, Asia Pac, and so on. So there are verticals, region verticals, below which there are projects. Then there are domain verticals as well in larger companies. They may have a finance segment, insurance segment, e-commerce segment, pharma segment. They may have transport, logistics, whatever. So there are many domain verticals, and if a customer belongs to a particular domain, then the practice is to bring the customer project under that domain. So that project for that customer who is in, let's say, e-commerce industry will go under domain of e-commerce. Now, what is a technology vertical? So typically, smaller to medium-sized companies will have this technology vertical concept. They may not have domain or region, but they will typically have technology vertical as a concept. So let's say the .NET projects, Microsoft .NET projects will be under will be a group under technology vertical. Then there could be Java-based projects, or there could be PHP-based projects, Ruby on Rails. So like that, there are technology groups. You will also, what I have not included, but you will also see in majority of the companies is that there will be groups. Front-end group will be separate, server-side group will be separate, database group will be separate, UX group will be separate, and so on. So when there is a project, it gets split among all these different groups, and there is somebody assembling or managing the scheduling, the work for each of these groups, and then assembling and all that. So a project may be done by typically 5 groups or 7 groups sometimes. You take a small project, you will have a front end, a simple web application with a mobile app. Let's see how many groups are there. So a web application will need a front end development. That is a separate group, front end, React.js or AngularJS or something like that. Then there is a server-side components that need to be developed. So that will go to the server-side group. Database work will go to the database group, 3 groups there. Now we have mobile. So Android and iOS, there are 2 separate groups. These so 5 technology groups come in already. I'm not even including the testing groups or quality assurance groups business analyst group, project management group, and so on. So there are other groups, right, which support the project group. So that's the structure of a services company. So all these groups are trying to either set standards and implement those standards across the projects in a common way. They'll also be working directly in the projects. They'll be loaned out to the projects, and then they'll work directly under the projects. Like business analysis, their main deliverable will be software requirement specifications, software functional specifications, and so on. I have put the testing under this itself. So the engineering group may solve certain problems for that particular project. The quality group has two phases. The first phase is ensuring quality for the projects. How they ensure quality for the projects is by reviews and testing. The reviews and testing is directly connected with the projects, but the certification part of it, like for example, if a company wants to certify themselves in ISO 9000, that's the responsibility of the quality group to maintain the certification. So they have two divisions. Project management, there are certain tools, techniques, technologies, or methods, project management methods, certifications around project management. They may like to bring in those standards into the company, and they may impose common standards across all the projects. R&D, we need to be ahead. The Microsoft, for example, is introducing latest technologies. They're upgrading their technologies in the month of November. It's a major shift in terms of what they're going to do in November. So the moment they announce, then there has to be a small group of people who will start looking at this new technology, and then try to see how their projects can benefit from that and how their customers can benefit from that. So for that, they have to build something as a proof of concept projects or something. So there will be a R&D group constantly looking over the horizon and seeing what is happening. They may look at the competition, what the competition is doing, and so on. People allocation is a major part of any services company. The reason being, if there are 100 people or 1,000 people in a company, or 10,000 people, they all have to be busy with projects. That's their main aim, to make sure that everybody is busy with projects. So this is the services company structure approximately. Now I'm moving to the product company structure. You can see the differences, So the product company, again, projects are there, but projects are coming under the product line and product versions. Okay, so there could be different product lines, 2 product lines or 3 product lines, or 100 product lines in some large companies. But there will be product lines, and within the product lines, there will be different versions. So the projects will be around those. Now, there will be a product group here, which is a little different from a services group. The product group owns the product in terms of its specifications, in terms of its feature sets, and so on. The quality group is similar, very similar. The 2 other groups here are a professional services group and customer support group. Professional services group is, there are many products. Okay, there are 2-3 kinds of products. One is a SaaS-based product, where you can go to the product, you can, put in your credentials, and you can log in and so on. That's a SaaS-based product. But a lot of products are still, installed at the customer's place. So there is a separate group called professional services group, which will help the customer to, when the customer buys a product, this group will go and then install the product in the customer's premises, configure the product, and make sure that customer will start using that. So that is the professional services group. Once the customer says that, look, this, whatever you have installed is good for my use, then the ball moves to the customer support group. After that, if the customer wants to have report a bug, report a problem, or report a new enhancement request, or just simply ask a question, as to how do I work with this aspect of the product or something like that. So that will go to customer support. R&D function is similar. Okay, so let me move to some major differences now. This is my last slide on this topic. So the way I look at it is, the topmost difference is, in a product company, customer needs are not defined upfront. Like, for example, there are two kinds of products. One is a B2C product, which is a business to consumer. The other is a B2B product, business to business. In both the cases, the product company is going across customers. In B2C product, like, for example, simple product like, Flipkart or Amazon, which probably everybody uses, there is a customer, everybody knows, but what exactly are the customer needs is not known. It's more like the product company defines certain features and customer adopts to those. So that's the kind of situation in a B2C product. In a B2B product, the company wants to sell it to many different companies, and even there, they will not have one customer defining all the requirements. Whereas in a services company, before we do a project in a services company for a customer, those requirements will be defined. So that's a huge difference. So moving on in a similar line, the product, a typical product will solve a specific problem in a domain. So there will be a lot of depth in terms of the solution, what that product will provide, but the breadth in terms of the domain will be narrow. So it operates on a narrow domain, but deep in terms of the problem solving. But services company is not like that. It doesn't have to solve all the problems that in that domain, okay? Because that particular customer may not experience those problems at all. So in terms of the depth of problem solution, it will be slightly shallow, but the breadth is high. So the whole aim of a services company is to go and attach themselves to a customer, so that that customer doesn't go to anybody else. So suppose the customer has a manufacturing problem, then also this services company says that, look, I have a domain, manufacturing domain, they can solve this problem for you. The customer has a technology problem, then also the services company will say, I have someone who can solve the problem for you. So it can be a HR system, then also they'll say we can solve the problem. So their aim is that customer should not move away from them. So the breadth is huge breadth is. So this we discussed already. The projects revolve around products and features, whereas the projects around customer and their needs. Typically, the technology is fixed in a product company. Although they start with a base technology, there may be chances that there are addendums in the sense there are newer features. Say for example, we have an e-commerce solution in Java platform, all right, but that e-commerce platform would need a recommendation engine, and this recommendation engine is built on some other technology, let's say .NET. So they have to integrate that. So in such cases, there will be some deviations, but otherwise, by and large, they will stick to one technology, one type of technology. But in services company, there is nothing fixed. Whatever technologies that are there in the market will also be there in that services company. Of course, I'm talking about a slightly large company, okay? Maybe about 10,000 people plus company. You will see that there is a plethora of technologies. So if you have an appetite for some particular technology, your appetite will be whetted there. And if you want to move from that technology to some other place, that is also fine. That is also possible. So the possibilities are huge. So each has its merits. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just trying to point out what is the merit in each of the companies. Okay, so I like to say one more thing about the bug that is introduced. A bug introduced in a product company affects all their customers, whereas a bug introduced in a services company in a particular project affects only that customer and the users of that customer. There's a huge difference. So anyway, I think I've taken already 20 minutes. I'm just watching my time. So I'll move quickly from this. From this time onwards, I'll move slightly quickly because there are 4 topics. So the takeaway number 1 is decide to pursue a line early in career. So you don't need to stick to one company to start with. I would say, there are really good things in both the companies. So, but if you want to experiment, but settle down as quickly as possible. Within a few years of your career, settle down if you want to experiment. If you don't want to experiment, great, no issues. But if you want to experiment, settle down, because because of what I said earlier, the philosophies are different. So it is difficult to adjust in between later. Okay. So let me move to the next slide. Next topic, development project or maintenance project. So this is a classic problem that we used to have, oh, I'm put on a development project. Oh, I'm put on a maintenance project. So this used to be classic issues. So I just want to bring, I want to present an architecture of a real life project. Okay. So this is called a component architecture. So if you see, there is users, end users at the top, and then, they come into certain portals, and then there is a front end for them. And then there are certain services, and there are certain integrations and certain databases and certain other integrations. So this is a typical structure of, or a typical architecture, component architecture of a project. It's a fairly large project, this one. So now let's say we want to develop this project. Okay, we want, let's say 20 people in this project. Obviously, not every 20 or not every one of those 20 people can be an expert in all these components. Okay, there are lots of components here. Okay, this is not from the story book. This is a real life. So there, as you see, there are lots of components. One person can only master 1 or 2 of these boxes. It's very difficult for one person to master all these boxes. It's impossible, actually. So they will be restricted to 1 or 2. There are some senior people in the project. They may be looking at all the projects, but they may not go into all the modules, but they may not go into depth. Into depth, there may be very few people, but those people will be stuck to a few modules or few components. Okay, so with that, so development of the project will give you very limited exposure in terms of the features and the code base. See, in software, code base is everything. What you develop or what you maintain, that's everything. But in a development project, you will see that you will have limited exposure. Whereas the same project, if it comes for maintenance, and if there is a person maintaining that project, or if there are 5 people or 10 people maintaining their project, if there is an issue that comes, that issue may impact majority of the modules. If the person works on about, let's say 10 issues, they would have touched 20 modules here. So it's issue based in a maintenance project. So they can touch the entire code base, which is a huge advantage in terms of, especially in the early life in the sense of professional life. If somebody comes across a large maintenance project, I think, one should not hesitate, because there is so much of learning, because there's so many people. So let's say for this project, so many people have spent their, brain power to solve the problems in all these areas. And all of those solutions are available to you to examine and then understand. So that's a huge advantage. But, development project, creativity. There is nothing like, there is a plain field and you need to build something. There is no equivalent of creativity. That creativity is amazing. So that's what the development project gives you. But then once the building comes up, if there is a problem somewhere, if there is a leak somewhere, to figure out where is the leak is a challenge. It's not a simple challenge. That is what you do in a maintenance project. Now, challenges in designing, architecting the solution, and then programming to the specification. Whereas here, the architecture is ready, the design is ready, the programs are ready, the code base is ready, but then you have to fix one problem. Where is that problem? How will I fix? If the code base is, let's say, 25,000 lines or 50,000 lines, if you fix somewhere, will it break other places? How do you know it doesn't have side effects? How do you know it actually fixes the problem? So many challenges. The development project, typically, you tend to have a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then you move on. So that will have its own advantage in terms of gaining the building, building knowledge, but it may also have a disadvantage in terms of not understanding the full life cycle. So sometime, one has to experience both. So I keep coming back to the bug, because this is one of the main things in software, to produce quality software without bugs. So I keep coming back to the bugs. Let's say, not intentionally, but it happens. I even made a model sometime back. If a person works, there are models for estimation. The estimation model says that there are many models, but basically it says that if a person works for 8 hours, then they have to produce some X amount of code or something like that, or they can develop so many function points or feature points or story points, whatever. So there are many methods. So I even came up with a model where if a person works for 8 hours, he will produce so many bugs. So it's not an intentionally produced bugs, but it will be there. We experimented also in some in one company, and then it was very it was very good. So what I'm saying is that if you leave a bug in your development project and move to the next project, you will not know that. Nobody will know that, right? Because you have moved away to other projects. You will not have visibility to this development project, which is under maintenance. Whereas maintenance project, you will know exactly how a bug got introduced and how it can be resolved. It's a huge advantage. Advantage for what? Advantage to make sure that you will not introduce bugs. So you can build a better software. So I just have a few slides here. So this is the major difference in terms of the life cycle of a development project. Similarly, there is a life cycle for the maintenance project. Okay, so this part is the development project, this part is the maintenance project, and then these are some of the graphs, how the number of requests come in. These are some statistical models. I just picked it up from the net just to show I'm not authenticating them in terms of its accuracy, but it looked right for me in terms of what it is trying to say. So all these areas you will experience. You have to experience. If you're in the software industry, you have to experience all these areas. So that brings me to the second takeaway. So get a good exposure to both. That is, both is development and maintenance projects early in the professional life. If you spend 5 years or 10 years as initial years, you should get a good exposure to both. So that will bring me to the third topic. I think, am I doing good on the time, or should I slightly hurry?
No, sir, please carry on.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, the third topic is how a programmer is a marketer or a salesperson or a support person. It's an interesting topic. So there is a, typically there is a marketing department, and then they're trying to figure out how to market. Basically, the marketing department means they're trying to create demand. They're trying to do something with which they will, seek an inquiry from the prospective customer. That's called demand creation. So they are into demand creation. Now, in order to create the demand, in a simple term, if I want to say, if I'm using a soap, let's say, and the soap is, there is a marketing department for the soap manufacturing company. They have to say something about the soap, maybe about the fragrance, maybe about, the color or whatever other features that the soap offers. So they try to advertise using those features of the soap. So similarly, the marketing guys in the software, they have to pick up some features. This can be both in the services side and in the product side, but still they have to pick up some key features of the particular company, what they produce and how they produce and so on. So the question is, where did they find those features that they have to market? So we'll answer this question later. Similarly, sales. So there is a sales guy out there, and the sales guy's main aim is in life is to get a new customer in. But to get a new customer in, he has to say something that, hey, look, my product has this feature which will make your life easier. Or he may say, my product has this feature which is better than the product that you are using, which has that feature. So typically, the conversation comes down to the feature. Whether you're a sales guy or a marketing guy. So marketing guy created the demand, right? So some customer said, yes, I have a need. And now the sales guy comes in and says that, look, okay, you have a need, great. Let me then sell this product to you or a service to you. So that is the job of the sales guy, is to get the actual contract. But in the process of doing his job, he will use this product feature or a services feature heavily. Now, where did that come from? So we'll answer that question. Now we are looking at a technical support engineer who is receiving calls from the customer, emails from the customer, whatever, chats, whatever, and then trying to solve the problem of the customer. So there is a bug, or there could be an enhancement request, or simple query or whatever, but that support engineer may not solve the may solve the problem or may not solve the problem. If he doesn't solve the problem, where will he go? So the answer is in programmer. It is the programming team, it's the engineering team which will provide answers to all. So it's this concept is little different from other manufacturing companies. Where in a manufacturing company, typically what happens is that there could be an R&D group, or there could be a separate group which could do all this. And the actual manufacturing person, the line person, may not have much visibility. Whereas in a software company, this visibility is high with the engineering team. So takeaway 3, you can work like an entrepreneur in a software company. You can be a marketer, you can be a sales guy, you can be a support guy. It's a huge advantage. In my experience, what I have seen is that the best of the sales guys, the best of the marketing guys sometimes are from the engineering side, because they know the internals of the product or the project that they are looking at, and they're able to talk it from the inside. So that is third one. Okay, I'm moving on to the last one now. So this was another problem that I thought I should present here, the technology landscape. So today, the technology has become so complex. It's become such a complex jungle that everybody finds it difficult to navigate through that. It's not just people who are not into the technology. It's for people into the technology as well. It's for people who are into the technology day in and day out, find it difficult to navigate. That's because this is I don't think I have covered everything here, but I have tried to cover some of the aspects. So I'll go back and forth a little bit here. I have another slide. I'll move to the next slide and come back here. So if you see in today's world, if there is a project, so for example, that slide that I showed, the technology architecture slide that I showed earlier, that project will need this kind of a structure. This is the team structure of a project. So project manager at the top, business analyst, solution architect, UX architect, server-side architect, front-end architect, mobile architect, data architect, configuration engineer, test architect. So typically these people have their own teams. UX, sorry, I did put the team under UX. UX will have a separate team. Server-side will have a separate team. Front-end team is separate. Mobile team is separate. DB team is separate. Test teams are separate. Manual testers, automation testers, performance testers. I am not sure whether I included everything, but I just tried to put some representative sample from. So now if I come back here, now if you see, these are the languages. Now these are the front-end languages. The guys, in the front-end languages may not know the server-side languages, okay, because they are Angular experts. They do not know how a C# or a C++ works. Now we have certain frameworks. A person who is good at Django framework has no idea about .NET framework, who has no idea about Zen framework, which is PHP framework. Now there is a plethora of databases that has come in. We used to have a long time back, we used to have one database, one or two databases, RDBMSs, but today there are a plethora of databases that has come up, structured databases, NoSQL databases, and so on. Then on the top of it, we have the big data. So on that we have several frameworks. We have Redis framework, Hadoop framework, Spark framework, and so on. Of course, we have operating systems. Then we have certain platforms. So we have a LifeRay platform where the entire application can be built, Drupal platform where the entire application can be built, and so on. So these are platforms where you can build the entire applications. Now coming to testing, testing has become very complex. Automation testing frameworks are there, and performance testing frameworks are there. So you need all of that to work. Cloud frameworks are there. Google Cloud is there, IBM Cloud is there, Amazon Cloud is there, Azure Cloud is there. So many cloud operations are there. Then some CI/CD is there. Search engines are there, different search engines. Then all these emerging technologies are there. BI, visualization, machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, data engineering, data science. Now it's really confusing for anybody. It is not just people outside the technology. I'm saying again that people inside the technology are confused today because there is so much. So what is the takeaway? Takeaway is be rooted to your fundamentals. What they teach you in the education institutions, the fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? So these are some of the fundamentals that I have put up. Of course, communication being the base. Whatever you do, you have to understand your subject and be able to communicate that subject well. So I guess 40 minutes, I think I made the time. So I think I'm done. If you have any questions, we can open to questions.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. We have with us Dr. Chinna Basappa, sir, the Director of Siddhganga Institute of Technology, as a panelist. Welcome, sir. I request Dr. Vaibhav, sir, Chairman, Department, please moderate the Q&A session.
Thank you, Jasna madam. I don't see much question and answers here.
Participants, please post your questions in the
Participants,
Q&A
you
box.
can post your questions because I'm not seeing any questions and answers. Questions here, of course, answers will be given by Mr. Nagaraj. Jasna ma'am, are you able to see some questions, or it's a problem with my Zoom account?
No, sir.
Okay, so I think we are on the same page. Participant, you can post your questions, please.
Well, it need not be questions. If you would like me to cover any
Interactive or
particular topic, I'll be happy to do that. You can say, can you cover this topic a little bit more? I'll be happy to do that. It need not be a question per se.
Yes, sure.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
Basically, at Anand Sagar University, Department of Computer Science and Technology, we are going ahead with the dual career plan, where students can have a primary career and a secondary career, which is sort of a backup career. So that means we encourage them to start a business, attempt starting a business from third semester onwards. Does a product company or a service company permit employee to have dual career, meaning to say be a full-time employee at their organization, at the same time have a startup, meaning to say be an employee and an employer at the same time?
That I don't think that practice is not there. If you, let's say your question is basically that you have a private business and you want to start a private business as a startup business, and then there is a certain amount of risk involved, and there is a certain amount of time that you may take to generate the revenue and establish yourself as a company and so on. And in that time, can you work in a company, right? So officially, I don't think that's a possibility. I have not seen that kind of a provision made in many companies. But I think I've seen people doing that unofficially. They say that we work over the weekends and stuff like that, and we're trying to do the startup. So they will work outside. They'll make sure that whatever deliverables and whatever their work is there, that is not affected. Their deliverables are not affected, and their availability to the company mainly is not affected. And they work over the weekends or off times, and then see how they can drum up their business, so to speak. So, but in some companies, I think in some large companies, there is an option to be an intrapreneur. Intrapreneur is something, where it's a new buzzword again. So what that means is that that company would allow you to work on a startup of your idea, but the company will sponsor it. So there are not, again, there are not many companies, and these kind of schemes will come up in a company and then it will go away after some time and so on. Okay, but such schemes are there. I've seen such schemes where company sponsors an entrepreneur. So there could be a contest of some kind, and they say that it has to be somewhat related to that company. Okay, so as long as it is somewhat related to that company and its product or its service, then they will say that, look, we will arrange a contest, and then the best ideas will be picked up, and you can, like a startup, you can start this business and we will sponsor you. So they will pay full salary and they'll sponsor you and everything else. But yeah, I mean, direct answer to your question is that not many companies do that. It is, it's not from a legal point of view also, I don't think it is a legal thing. that you carry two things. Many companies have an employment agreement where they say that, look, you cannot have another company under your name, or you cannot work in another other company, and so on. So these issues are there.
Thank you, Mr. Anil. Mr. Anil, there are a few questions coming up. Can we take up?
Sure, sure.
There is one question from Mr. Pradeep. He is asking, may I know the machine learning based opportunities IT industries? May I know machine learning based opportunities in IT industry?
Well, see, there is a lot of, outset, there is a lot of machine learning opportunities. Okay. Now you have to be careful with this particular thing, because what happens is that, some of these buzzwords, they will attract students, especially they get attached to the, the buzzwords. You should not get attached to buzzwords so easily. Okay. But typically that's what will happen. So I'm just trying to caution you some things about the buzzwords. Say, for example, in this particular case, the machine learning, I would take one step further. It's called data science. Okay. So the data science, is a topic that is, if you have to work in data science, ideally you should have a, right qualification. It's not that, it's not like .NET programming. Okay. There are two different animals. Okay. You could probably take a course, 3-month course, and be a .NET programmer of somewhat some reasonable capacity. Okay. But again, without proper computer science knowledge, if you are just programming, that's a different thing. Okay. So if you take my slide number 4, takeaway, be rooted to fundamentals, you may not have all the fundamentals, but you will be a .NET programmer. Okay. So that's about .NET programming. Now coming to machine learning, data science. Data science, it is a very deep and broad area. It's both deep and broad, and it requires a tremendous amount of knowledge. So it is for people who are with a lot of experience, either with a lot of experience or with a lot of study background. They must have got a doctorate, or they must have done some masters in statistics, or they must be very good in their domain. So it's generally, data science is not for freshers. But because of the buzzword data science, it somehow looks very nice to say that I'm a data scientist and so on. So a lot of people get into the trap, and then they try to pursue that line. Okay. So you have to understand what is a line that you can pursue. What is the progressive line that you can pursue? It's very important. You can't jump into data science straight away. Okay. It won't work actually. It won't work at all. So that is one part. The other part with data science is there are so many new tools and frameworks that are coming up today that data science will become a commodity. I mean, what a person can do, the framework or the tool can do. Okay. So data science will, probably become a commodity over a period of time. Now, okay, that means, how do I approach? You may ask that question, right? So in the whole data line, okay, the end process is called data science. Okay, that is, but there is a whole lot of work that needs to be done to present the data to the data science. Okay. And that is where the jobs are. The key jobs are in data engineering. It is called data engineering, where you start picking up the data and start preparing the data so that the data goes to data science area. This is where the jobs are. And this is something that can be possibly learned, with less experience. So when you say machine learning, you have to be careful. Okay. Are you in the data science area? Are you trying to interpret something? Are you trying to, recommend something? I would say it is typically, see, there are exceptions everywhere. Yeah, there is no such rule that, it is not applicable to you. I'm not going to say that because, anybody can break that exception and anybody can prove that they can do it. Okay. But I'm talking more at a general level where, if there are 100 people, what can apply for 60, 70 people? There may be some 10 people who are extraordinary and they can do anything, which is perfectly fine, no issues. But I'm speaking more for the other 70, 80 people who may not be able to do that. So I would say, be careful about some of these buzzwords and look at, and even when those buzzwords are there, look at what is the fundamental behind that and go with the fundamental rather than the end thing.
Thank you, sir. Sir, next is a very interesting question by Anirudh. He's asking, sir, why is there a pay difference in service and product industry?
So
It's quite
no,
directly
actually, I had a point. I took
to the
off.
point.
Sorry.
He had directly come to the point only. Anirudh, he's asking
No, which
why
is
there's a
good.
pay difference.
Which is good. You need to understand that. Actually, I had a point in that services to product. I had a point, but last minute I removed it for something else. So the point that I had was that, see, in a services industry, right, the revenue of the company is directly proportional to the headcount. Okay, so that is, for example, there is a services company, okay, X, services company A, let's say. Okay, this company has 100 people. Okay, 100 people means, let's say, given a working day, 800 working hours, 8 hours a day, right? So 800 working hours, right? So this 800 working hours, the company will translate it into dollar rate. I'm saying dollar rate because it's a general practice, because a lot of companies work with US customers. So the dollar rate is a general practice. So don't look deep into that dollar rate. It's just a thing. So dollar rate, let's say $20 an hour. Okay. So we are talking about $16,000 a day. Okay. So of course, not all the people can work. Some people will be on leave and some people. So don't take all the $16,000. Take 80% of that or something like that. So that is the revenue, and then you multiply that with total number of working days and so on. So this is how the services company arrives at its revenue. Okay. So if you see, there is a direct proportion between the rate and the person and the revenue. Okay. Now let's take the model for a product company. The product company model is different. A product may sell for, let's say there are 10 people in a company, the same 100 people in a product company, right? Same 100 people. Now this product could sell for $1 million, or it could sell for, $1,000. So that's how successful the product company is. That's how successful the product is in terms of how many users the product can get, and what those users can pay, what those customers can pay for the product. So it's somewhat of a gamble there. Okay. In services company, the gamble is less. As long as you work in a methodical, in a efficient way, you will be able to get customers and you will be able to get your next piece of work. Okay. We started we started in the industry. I started, Arvind started before. So I started in 86. There were rumors after 2-3 years saying that, somebody, one of my uncle was there and he was in US, and this guy came and then he asked me a question. You are in software. What happens when all the companies, you write software for all the companies, then what happens to your job? This is a question he asked in about 88 or something like that. So then I didn't know how to answer that at that time, but there is no such thing, So you will always get customers and you will always get work as long as you are working in a methodical way, in an efficient way. Whereas if the product fails in a product company, the product can fail. A competition can come and kill the product. Okay. There are many ways. The product may not be successful at the end user. The product company may not be successful. Okay. But on the other hand, there are many successful product companies. There are 22 unicorns, I believe, as of now, which is all product companies which have made more than 1,000 crores in Indian stock market and worldwide and so on. So there are many. For those 22 unicorns, we don't know how many product companies did not make it. Maybe there are 22,000 product companies, I would say, which did not make it, and maybe 22 companies made it. So this is a gamble. Now, coming to your question, when that successful product company, that 100 people product company is able to sell its product, and which is not in proportion to the number of people, or there is no headcount revenue, there is no such calculation, their revenues will be huge. And when their revenues are so huge, they will not mind paying a little more than average salary rate that is going on. Sometimes, I mean, it may be exorbitantly huge, as you might have known how much Google or Microsoft or Amazon pays. So they pay based on see, Amazon pays see, these are all related to their business ethics and business ideals. In Amazon, they don't have to make profits. All that they need to do is to increase the share prices. So this is how the Amazon operates. So they don't mind paying. So, but then how many people can get such opportunities also has to be seen, and whether one can qualify into that, it will be limited number of people. So for vast majority of people, what should be done? So you have to look at what is your strength. You have to ultimately look at what is your strength, where can you play, and how safe you want to be, and stuff like that. You want to be safer ground slightly, then probably services industry is a slightly safer ground, because you can go into an established product company, which is good, if you can make it into that, which is great. But if you're doing a new company or a not so established or yet to establish product company, you have to look at it correctly. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. One last question we have from Sumed. Good evening, sir. What could be a few best practices to apply in maintenance project?
So there are many best practices that from an engineering point of view, if you would like to take, say, for example, what can I say? Impact analysis, let's say. So let's say there is a bug, or let's say there is an enhancement to be done. Okay, there are about 10 different modules in that particular software or a project or a product, whatever. So 10 different modules are there. And now you are supposed to enhance some feature or add a new feature. Okay, this addition of a new feature, where all does it impact? First of all, from a module perspective, does it impact all the modules? Does it impact only one module? From a technology layer perspective, does it impact all the screens? Does it impact most of the screens? Does it impact one screen, or it's a new screen on its own? Does it impact all the tables? Does it impact only one table, or is it a new table on its own? What is the impact? In order to analyze the impact, there are tools. You can deploy a tool and see some things. Okay, so how to do impact analysis? Then once you design the fix, design the enhancement, and then implement the enhancement, and you run the code. Okay, now there are code analyzers. Okay, there is a white box code analyzer. There is a how does the code execute? You can see how the code executes, and is it creating a is it creating a side effect? You can see in the tool. Okay, now you have to design certain test cases how to design those test cases so that you will make sure that the new enhancement that you put in works and it doesn't have side effect. How to do performance testing for that? Did it have a performance impact, this particular fix that you did or enhancement that you did it affect the performance in any way? How to do performance testing, how to deploy the performance testing tools into this. So there are, in the maintenance life cycle that I showed one slide, there was a maintenance life cycle, a short maintenance life cycle. So at many different, say starting from how to receive the bug itself, how to receive the enhancement itself. What is the kind of tool that you're looking at? How many customers are sending you that request or different requests? And how will you capture it? How will you assign it to internal teams? So there are so many aspects where the best practices can be deployed. See, again, best practice means there is no stipulated best practice as such. What works best for you, for that company, for that situation, and how that practice will solve the problem and make sure that the people work more efficiently is the best practice. Okay. I mean, it's not something Gartner given best practice that you have to implement in your project, or a McKinsey given best practice that you have to implement in your project. No, McKinsey is doing his job because he is going to earn his money, and then so that's fine. But just because McKinsey is saying, you don't have to follow that. You have to figure out what is the best practice for you, which is how you can work more efficiently in your ecosystem. That is your best practice. So that is something that you have to determine, or your company, your team has to determine, your team lead has to determine, your leaders have to determine, company has to determine, and deploy that best practice. And that will become a best practice for you, even though it is not published in McKinsey journals or Harvard journals, which is fine. No issues about it. It is your best practice.
Thank you, sir. I think there are no more questions here. Okay. So at the outset, I would like to thank KNB sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor and Chairman Bytes for giving us an opportunity to attend this digital series of lectures. I would like to thank Mr. Anil Nagraj sir. He took his time out. And explained us on structure of services companies and structure of services companies and product companies. And he had also updated us on maintenance projects, development projects, and at the end of the lecture, he had given a very, very good sentence that be rooted to fundamentals. This is very important. And we have to be rooted to our fundamentals. If our fundamentals are strong, then only we can proceed further and can do, because if the foundation is strong, then only we can have a big building onto that. I'd like to thank Girish sir for proposing the vote of thanks for introducing Mr. Anil. I also like to thank Mr. Imtiaz for arranging the Zoom Zoom link for this digital series. And I would like to thank Jasma madam who had coordinated this event. I would like to thank all the participants who had attended this, and not only attended this, they had asked the questions for which once again I'm thankful to Mr. Anil Nagraj sir for answering all the questions. And once again, thanks to Anil Nagraj sir for sharing his experiences through in the product industries and in the services industries. Sir, you had a vast experience into the marketing field, into the HR field, and into the product development and in the maintenance. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing your time and enlightening our student on with your enriched experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jasma ma'am, over to you, Jasma ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Anil Nagraj sir.
Thank you, sir. Shall I leave the meeting?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Good day. Good day to everybody.
Good day, sir.
Have a nice day. Come. No, no, the lecture was.
They print out.